Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support.
The story begins on the 98th labyrinth floor. A pink-haired adventurer is seen breathing heavily as she tries her best to run away from something. She turns around to see that one of her companions called Wimmie was battling it out against a gigantic sea beast. She couldn't believe the sight that she was witnessing as Wimmie fought the beast alone, but with a smile on his face and a cheerful laughter to follow. We now turn back to a few months ago in a different part of the labyrinth. A terrified adventurer stood by himself as he continues to tremble in fear over something while holding his sword as a beast approached him. He knew that people who didn't choose to retreat immediately when they meet the floor boss, or those who are greedy and choose to prioritize merit instead, what awaits them is death. 3 other adventurers laid on the ground unconscious with injuries covering their bodies. As the lone adventurer stares at them, he knew that what he thought of from before was the same scene that was right in front of him. He continues to stare at the others while wondering if they were still alive, but a massive tail slammed itself to catch his attention. God damn this beast, a gigantic crocodile-like monster the size of your mother stood in front of the lone adventurer. Its eyes began to wander about as though searching for more prey. As the lone adventurer continued to tremble in fear in the same exact spot he stood in. He stares at the beast, and could only think that this was what a floor boss was like. He recalled from just moments before that it only took the floor boss one hit to defeat the other adventurers. His face was filled with more fear as he slowly realized that a single hit made everyone incapacitated, making him question if this was the power of the floor boss, and that they needed to get out of here. But what could he do by himself? He thought about carrying everyone to run away or to try and buy time until rescues comes. But all those scenarios ended up with him being eaten, so none of them was possible. But our boy doesn't give up. He held his blade up knowing that there was still only one way for him to make it out. "Brace yourself, Wimmie Strauss," shouted Wimmie to himself. He then takes a deep breath before casting his own spell called Switch Puppenspieler, which stands for puppeteer. His body started to move by itself, as Wimmie knew that after finishing his chant, the thought of him escaping alone crossed his mind at that exact moment. He recalled that the dragon wings were the ones that took him in like their comrade, and that he owned them, and for all the days that he spent with them. The memory ends as Wimmie started to laugh like a maniac, which shocks the floor boss as its eyes widened upon seeing him in this state. The floor boss immediately knew that our boy had activated his main character plot armor, and started to charge towards him. But as it did, Wimmie knew that this moment of his life was something that he was a little proud of because he was thinking something like that. The scene then changes to the Dragon's Wings party house. The 3 adventurers who were knocked out like a lil bitch stood against Wimmie and cornered him. Wimmie was nervously laughing and wondering why, as he felt that something strange was going on. But a sword strike lands just inches away from his face as he looks at it with shock. The man who landed the attack tells Wimmie to not make him repeat himself. He tells Wimmie that he needed to get lost as he was scum. This man was called Kronos and is the leader of the Dragon's Wings party. The 2 ladies by his side was called Melis the mage and Knct the priest. They agreed with what Kronos said, and noted that it was obvious since Wimmie had taken the good parts this time. Knct looks at our boy in disgust as she tells him that he was acting like a hero now just because he delivered the final blow to the floor boss. Kronos adds on that it was thanks to his magic blade and Melis's magics that they were the ones that had cornered the floor boss, making him wonder why Wimmie had counted those as his accomplishment as well. Wimmie tried his best to explain to them that he never thought about it that way, and considered the victory something that they all shared. He then recalls that he had miraculously managed to defeat the floor boss. It was truly a miracle. Wimmie thought everyone would praise him, but why he wondered, as his team continued to insult him, stating that his buffs this time were lacking and that it was all his fault. Wimmie could now see that from the very beginning they had never liked him. His face was showered with defeat as the team continued to insult our boy. Wimmie then falls onto his knee and apologizes to them for all the things that he had done. He tells them that Dragon's Wing is the only place that he had, and that there was no one else who would hire a grantor like him. He swore to them that he would do his best so not to cause any more trouble. "So please let me stay. This is the only place I belong," said our boy. Kronos just stares at him in silence even after hearing those words. He then proposes an idea to Wimmie, telling him to fight him and win. If he does, he would be able to stay in their party. But as Wimmie held onto the sword, he knew that it was impossible for a non-combatant like him to defeat a warrior like Kronos. He started to laugh nervously once again as he figured that he needed another miracle. But hearing his laughter made Kronos angry, as he questions Wimmie about what he was laughing at. He then chokes our boy and lifted him against the wall, insulting him by calling Wimmie a scumbag who can only use beginner-level buffs, and that someone like him shouldn't disobey the leader that was Kronos. Knct then tells him to stop, as Wimmie would die, so Kronos finally lets go of our boy by throwing him onto the floor and called him a weakling. He continues to curse over the fact that someone like him could have defeated the floor boss. As Wimmie tried to catch his breath, he couldn't believe that they did this to him, even though he had placed his life on the line for them. To the dragon's wings that took him in when he could only do odd jobs, all Wimmie wanted to do was repay them, and yet he was treated like this by them. The door soon opens and someone else steps into the room. Wimmie looks at the stranger with a shocked look on his face. An elf lady wearing robes had appeared, making Wimmie question who she was. Kronos introduces the elf as Shapia, who will be joining their party in his stead. As Shapia politely bows, Kronos tells him that she was going to be a great asset to help make up for the hole that he left behind. So he approaches Wimmie to remind him not to repeat himself. "Get out, we don't need you anymore," were the words Kronos said as he smiles at our boy with evil intentions. Wimmie could only look back in fear. The scene then changes to a beautiful town with a clock tower in the middle of it. This city was called Fullbrown. It was a labyrinthine city filled with the dreams and hopes of a young adventurer. A city that thrived on the gifts that came from the labyrinth, and from the people who came to it in search of them. Merchants could be seen bargaining with customers with the rewards from the various floors of the labyrinth, as the labyrinth contains gold and silver treasures, as well as unique monster materials, and not to forget a view that doesn't exist on the surface. It was dangerous, and unexplored areas are endless. Status and honors are proportional to pioneering accomplishments that are bound to follow. The bond we share with those who have crossed the line of death with you is stronger than a family bond. Those who risk their lives to explore the labyrinth were called adventurers. We now return to our boy Wimmie, who was walking down the streets with a depressed aura around him. He talked about how he wanted to die and continued to mutter to himself that he was sure that there are jobs in the Adventurers Guild, but the job of granter is not a popular one, and he doubted any party would hire him anyway. He then thought about how he could hunt the small fry just like in the old days, but changes his mind, hoping that there was maybe a E-rank party that would hire him, but reminded himself to not overestimate what he could do. So he hoped that an F-rank party would be more suitable for someone like him. He then reaches a tavern where customers inside were shouting out with laughter. He pauses for a moment to rummage through his pockets and took out only 3 coins, but he knew that he had to drink at times like this. So our boy enters the tavern with 3 coins. The barmaid was happy to see our boy and greeted him with a huge smile. Wimmie greets her back as her name was revealed to be Greta. She then congratulated Wimmie on how his party, the Dragon's Wings, had defeated a floor boss. The customers inside the tavern rejoiced with cheer as they overheard what Greta had said. She continues to tell Wimmie that if the guild passes the review at the killing site, she believed that their party would be promoted to an A-rank party, which made her question if he was here to celebrate. But our boy nervously laughs again and tells her that for now all he wanted was his usual order of beer and sausage. A plate filled with just a massive sausage was laid before our boy, who took a bite from it. But he noted that the taste was not very good, probably because of what happened to him. He started to laugh again, but immediately covers his mouth. He knew that he couldn't stop it, as even Kronos had told him to stop laughing like that because it was disgusting, but realized that he was no longer a part of the Dragon's Wings anymore. Looking around the tavern, Wimmie realized that they used to celebrate with everyone, but he was not good at joining the conversation. But he still thought that it was fun. His vision soon started to blur as he tried his best to hold back his tears, as our boy knew that there was no more place for him anymore. Greta looks at him in silence before the door to the tavern opened, as a voice called out to Wimmie. An exhausted girl appears as Wimmie questions her on why she was here. This girl was called Heidi Marie, as she continues to smile while looking at him. The scene then changes to the Adventurers Guild, where a member of the guild reports to the guildmaster that they had examined the corpse of the floormaster, commonly known as the giant crocodile, who was defeated by the Dragon's Wings party. The guildmaster asked him how it was, to which he replies that according to the party's report, the 4 of them combined their strength to defeat it, which made the guildmaster question if there was a problem with that. The member continues to report that they had examined the wounds on the floor boss body, where most of the wounds, including the stoppage, were caused by a machete. He added on that there were wounds caused by magic swords and magic too, but he didn't think that those were enough to cause any damage. The guildmaster took a moment in silence to absorb the information before stating that the only one in the dragon's wings that used a machete was Wimmie Strauss, which made him wonder if a non-combatant, a grantor, had defeated a floor boss with his strength alone. Yes, this is true. It is called main character plot armor. The scene changes once again to Heidi Marie, who is looking at a black dot on her map. She wonders why her tracker on Wimmie was moving away from the dragon's wings to a cheap inn. She rummages her pocket looking for the wiretap she had placed and finally finds it. She hears Kronos telling Wimmie to get lost and that he was a scum. Her face was filled with anger as she clenches her fist hard over the fact that Kronos dared to say that to her Wimmie. A side note, a grantor was one of the basic jobs of the adventurer. It changes the abilities of the target by applying a buff technique to the target. We now return to the moment when Heidi Marie arrived at the tavern in a hurry. Greta quietly greets her before laughing out loud and calling her Stalker S-chan. Heidi Marie was annoyed to hear that nickname and tried to correct Greta by insulting her as Cowgirl. But Greta wasn't affected by the nickname of Cowgirl, as she flexes the reasons why she was called that while Heidi Marie could only repeat the words drop dead in a curse-like manner, but she quickly shouted out that she wasn't here to fight and turns to Wimmie. She looks at her all worried and asks if he was okay. He looks at her with a nervous look and figures out that the rumors had already spread about him and the dragon's wings. But Heidi Marie revealed that she was the only one who knew, which made our boy questioned how she knew about it. With a look that could kill anyone, she stares right into our boy's soul and informs him that she knew everything about him. Hearing that made Wimmie flustered as he wonders how, but she simply tells him that it was because they were from the same village. Our boy doesn't think much about it and concluded that it made sense. Greta overhears their conversation and soon wonders herself about what was going on with WM. This was when he reveals to them that he had gotten himself fired from the dragon's wings. This reveal shocks everyone in the tavern as they all turned and looked at Wimmie with a confused look on their faces. The customers in the tavern soon talked amongst themselves about Wimmie. One of them wonders why he was fired from the party when they were about to become a rank, while another heard that all he does was chores. The others seemed to agree as they noted that they had only heard about the other 3 members but nothing about Wimmie. As the customers continued to gossip amongst themselves, Heidi Marie sat beside him and ate her food. Wimmie tells her that although the dragon's wings didn't give him time to prepare, but he did leave the paperwork behind just in case. He also believed that Sophia seems to be good at paperwork, as it was what anyone could do. Hearing the name Sophia made Heidi Marie wonder if she was the girl who replaced him, to which our boy reveals that she was actually a beautiful elf. Heidi Marie couldn't believe that there was another woman for Kronos, but Wimmie was worried over what she said. He took another look at his drink before saying that it seems to be that way. He recalls the romantic atmosphere that Kronos and the ladies had while he worked, regretting the fact that he should have built a little more trust. But the memory ends as Wimmie started to laugh nervously again. Heidi Marie notices this and noted that Wimmie hadn't yet fixed that habit of his of laughter. He became flustered over her remark and wonders if it was disgusting, but Heidi Marie tells him that it wasn't. In fact, she liked the way that our boy laughs, while adding on the fact that she had missed the way he used to correct her. Hearing her words made Wimmie blush as he tells her not to say such things which could cause a misunderstanding. But her riz activates as she tells him that it was fine if he thought so. Boom goes the dynamite as Wimmie shyly tells her to stop it. But she soon wonders why he was fired, as Wimmie took a sip of his drink, but he spits it out the moment that Heidi Marie talked out loud about the fact that he had defeated a floor boss by himself. All he could ask her was what she meant by that. She tells him that the usual dragon's wings didn't have the ability to defeat a floor boss, which meant that he did it. Wimmie became even more flustered as he tells her that it was a misunderstanding and that all he did was just dealt the finishing the blow. He continues to tell her that it was just a coincidence that he defeated it, as it was all thanks to everyone that had done damage to it. But our girl doesn't believe that stuff, as she tells him that she believes that the floor boss didn't take damage from any of them but only from Wimmie's attack, so the floor boss was essentially just his solo subjugation. Wimmie continues to deny the truth as he tells her that she was overestimating him. He informs her that the 3 of them had outstanding talent and that he was desperate enough not to cause trouble for them. But all this made him wonder why she always thinks so highly of him. But before Heidi Marie could explain why, Greta cuts in to inform them that she was born in Full Brown and had never heard of anyone defeating a floor boss on their own. She then went on to tease Marie that she shouldn't start saying weird things due to her stalking habit. This was when she reveals to everyone that she said that about Wimmie because she listened to a wiretapped conversation. Greta hears this and tells her that she had officially crossed the line. But as the two ladies battled it out, Wimmie watched and nervously revealed that the reason he got fired was because of his own fault and a trust issue. Marie was annoyed to hear this and slams her hand onto the table before yelling out, "Enough with your wimpy attitude." She then calls out to Cowgirl for a beer, but Greta warns her that she wasn't good with alcohol. But she doesn't care, and so as Marie talked to Wimmie about his cognitive dissonance with a drink in her hand, she was soon knocked out in a single blow. Comment below if you have a friend like this. Greta tells her that she was still on her first jug, but she didn't care as she even ordered for one more to come quick. Wimmie then tells her that it was enough for today, but before she was completely knocked out, Marie handovers a card to him and tells him to take it. Wimmie takes the card as she tells him that it was her business card. The words on it said Knct Lael, which was the strongest A-rank party in Fullbrown, having a member of high status, and of course the screening process was strict. Marie was recruited there, and she quickly made a name for herself at the very beginning of her career. She then tells him to come over to their party house tomorrow, as she wanted Wimmie to try working with them for a while, just for the experience, and that she was even willing to vouch for him. Wimmie was flustered to hear that, and wondered if she could do something like that. Marie then tells him that she was the 74th Sage, and the candidate for the next top brass, so doing this was easy for her. Time passed as Wimmie carried her on his back. He turns to tell Greta thanks for the meal, but she worries if Marie was too heavy for him to carry. He assures her that although Granters were weak, this much was not a problem. As they turn to leave, Greta warns them that there were a lot of drunken adventurers at this hour. As they walked through the streets, Wimmie spoke out loud that he was afraid that the other members would have a bad opinion of him just because he joined, due to Marie's vouching for him. He was sure that someone like him would only cause trouble there, and that she might end up hating him for it. But as he talked in a depressed style, a bottle was thrown in the air and landed on a mark that had a 100 score in the center of it. A loud voice started to laugh out loud as Wimmie took notice of it. He sees that there are two men drinking and throwing their bottles against the wall. Wimmie tried his best to silently walk past the two men who were clearly drunk, but one of them notices him and walks towards our boy. They look at him because they were curious about what it was that Wimmie was carrying. Upon closer inspection of Marie's face, the two drunks recognizes her as the thief from yesterday, which confuses Wimmie. The two drunks recounted the memory from when Marie had bought all the snowball snacks that they were lining up to buy at the store, including the limited edition one. Wimmie could only say that he was sorry to hear that in his mind, but couldn't believe that they would call her a thief over that. But the two drunks soon demanded that Wimmie wake her up as they wanted an apology. Hearing their demands made him wonder what he should do, but the drunks continued to shout at our boy, even going so far as to try to grab onto Marie. But Wimmie instantly casts his enchantment spell twice, making him disappear in a flash as the drunk man simply grabbed onto air. The two of them wonder where Wimmie went as they looked around, but he appears far away from them, telling them that he was going to apologize on her behalf, but the two drunks were too stunned to speak. Wimmie then quickly decides to move away, as he believes that they were going to get even more angrier. But they were alarmed to find out that the girl on his back was Marie from Knct Lael. But they wondered if he was from the same guild as well, as they couldn't even see how fast he moved. Wimmie moved across the city with great speed, before coming to a stop. He looks back and figures that they were far away from the drunk men and that it should be okay for now. As he continued to carry Marie back home, she started to make a noise which made him wonder if she was awake right now and could walk, but she tells him that she couldn't. Wimmie simply wore a smile on his face as he recalled the conversation they had back at the tavern where she told him that she would vouch for him. But our boy was still felt that it was bad for someone like him to join Knct Lael. He also knew that Marie is a candidate for the next top brass, and also has a rare job as a sage. She was a good person who always talks to someone like him, so he knew that he couldn't cause her any more trouble. But she shouts at him to just come. Even grabbing Wimmie by the shoulders, she tells him that he had infinite possibilities which he would realize if he joins the Knct Lael. She then tells him that he needed to live his life however he wanted. As they walked through the city, Wimmie couldn't help but thank Marie for coming to him when he was going through a difficult time. He also knew that he wasn't in the position to say this, but informs her that she too should live freely, and that she had no obligation to him. But she tells him that that wasn't it. She wasn't doing this because she felt obligated to him, which made him wonder why she would do this for him then. But our girl became nervous and shy as she tells him that it was better for our boy to not know the true reason. Wimmie continued to ask her why, but she refused to answer him. This was because Marie knew everything about him. We now talk about the Knct, the largest A-ranked party with over 100 members. 30% of the floor bosses have been defeated by this guild. A guard stood alone in silence at the gates of the renowned guild. He seems to be staring at our boy, who was moving around frantically. Wimmie looks at the guild building and wonders if it was truly okay for him to be here. Seeing the harsh state that Wimmie was in made the guard note that there was a suspicious person right in front of him. The guard soon asks out loud to Wimmie about what he could do for him, but the question simply frightens him even more as he hesitates to answer the guard. With a creepy smile and a nervous laugh, Wimmie began to look for something in his jacket, but his actions caused the guard to prepare himself, as he thought that Wimmie was pulling out a weapon. But in a small voice, Wimmie tells him that what he held in his hand was something that Marie had given him. The guard looks at it with a complete shock on his face, as he couldn't believe that Wimmie was her friend. His words made Wimmie confused. We soon meet up with Marie, who welcomes Wimmie into Knct. He looks around the area with an awe expression on his face, as Marie tours him around the place and introduces the various facilities they had. Wimmie continued to be shocked over how this place looked more like a mansion than a party house. The guard soon approaches them to apologize to Wimmie about how he acted towards him earlier on, telling Wimmie that he didn't look like the Wimmie that he was told about. But our boy nervously replies to the guard that it was his fault for acting suspiciously. Marie couldn't believe that Abel was able to make such a mistake. Abel is the name of the guard. Abel then points out that Marie had described Wimmie as a gallant man, which she quickly denies, as she turns to Wimmie to swear to him that she didn't say that. Feeling flustered, she immediately points to a different door and tells Wimmie to head this way. The door opens and leads to a huge number of members gathered. Marie announces to Camilla, who was a female knight, with a deadly stare, that she had brought Wimmie. Camilla gave off a slight smile over seeing who Wimmie is in person, but our boy suddenly froze as she walked over to him, as he knew that she was the leader of the Knct, Camilla the Silverhair. As she towers over our boy, she commented that Wimmie was much smaller than she thought, but she apologizes for her remark, as she had been told by someone that he was a handsome and masculine man. Marie appears with a flustered look on her face as she tells Camilla that she didn't say that. Camilla then shakes our boy's hand and welcomes him to Knct and introduces herself as the leader. Wimmie introduces himself as well, but could only think that she had an amazing grip strength. Camilla then tells him that Marie had told her about him, and that everyone from Knct welcomes those who are capable. She then questions him on what he did with the Dragon's Wings party. Wimmie reveals that he didn't have a lot of mana, so he usually does the general chores and things such as enemy search, office work, and so on, but Marie tells him not to speak of such useless things like those and about being fired, but Wimmie wanted to tell the truth. Camilla then informs him that they were only going to scout the floor for this dive, and that she needed him to spot the enemies from the rear. Wimmie was shocked to hear that he was going for a dive right now, so he turns to Marie for answers, but she simply repeated what she said before, that he was here to gain experience, but Wimmie was still in shock as he argued that it was too soon and that he had never dived with this many people before. But his worries were brushed aside as Marie tells him that it was going to be okay and that they should go on. Wimmie could only tremble nervously. The scene then changes to the inside of the labyrinth. The members of the guild were all gathered around a podium that held a magical orb that gave off a magic circle around it before shining brightly. The labyrinth is navigated using the teleportation circle located at each level of the labyrinth. Multiple teleportation locations will appear when you defeat the floor boss on that level. Depending on the teleportation circle, you can even jump over multiple floors. The members soon formed a line and walked deeper into the labyrinth. Wimmie followed closely behind Marie in a slouched posture. One of the members in front of Marie gave her a look which she sees before turning to Wimmie. She handed him a piece of cloth and tells him to put it on for a while. She informs him that they were going to use the teleportation line that the Knct has been keeping secret and that he was still an outsider. He calmly wears it and noted that it was only naturally, especially when it comes to information on the teleportation circle, which can jump over multiple floors. It's an advantage over the other parties. Marie then tells him to grab her, so our boy naturally reaches out and held her hand. This action causes them to simply stand in silence before Marie commented out loud that it was bold of our boy to hold her hand. Hearing her remark made him flustered, so he decided to hold onto her shoulder instead. But she tells him that she didn't mind, but all he wanted her to do was to stop the teasing. After that, the guild used a secret teleportation circle a few times. They soon arrived on floor 97, where Wimmie was in awe once again, as he expected this from Knct. He didn't think that they would get to this floor so soon, which showed the strength of an A-rank party. But he soon starts to panic over what he could do in such an amazing party. Camellia and Marie began to stare at him, as Wimmie continued to talk down about himself in the corner. Camellia then asks Marie about what he was mumbling about, so she tells him that Wimmie was nervous because this was his first time, and that he was a very cautious person. Camellia noted that it was good to be cautious, before slapping Wimmie hard on the back, reminding him that it was also not good if he was too tense. She recalled that he had dived into this floor with the B-ranked party Dragon's Wings, and even defeated a floor boss here before them, so she tells him that he didn't have to worry so much like that. She then reminds him that mapping was the main objective for today, which was all he had to do. Wimmie began to tear up upon hearing those kind words from Camellia, as he felt that he was going to cry. Marie adds on that there were only good people in Knct, and that he should take it easy, but his face told a different story. A scene of strange characters appeared which Wimmie senses as he quickly turns around. Marie asks him what was wrong, so he tells her that he might have heard something, but it could have been his imagination. Marie felt that it was some sort of omen and advised Wimmie to report it. He noted that it wasn't something like that but still felt different. So just in case, Wimmie decided to expand his search range. As he lifted his arm, a magical circle appears and gave vision to Wimmie about what was in front of them, which made him realize something. Marie then reminds him that if he finds anything, he should report it to Camellia using transmission magic. He agrees with what she said as the group continued to walk down the staircase. Wimmie then calls out to Camellia, who asks him what he wanted. He informs her that he suspects that there was a rockfall trap on the upper left side, in about 45 meters. Hearing about a trap made her question if he was sure. Wimmie then tells her that he was about 90% sure, and that the trap might have a delay in activation. But she didn't care and tells him that the next time he finds something, he should use the public channel to tell everyone. Wimmie replies with "Yes, madam," and noted that a whole party transmission was something a large party could only have, which made him nervous. But our boy pulls the courage out from somewhere and started to broadcast his message to everyone. He informs them that there was a possibility that there was a rockfall trap ahead to the left. The expected mass is about 150 kilogram and has the shape of a column. All the members of the party were shocked to hear that, as they shared the same look on their faces. Wimmie wonders if he screwed up as he sees the commotion, while Marie simply smiled behind him. Camellia then noted that if the trap was only that much, then Abel should be enough to block it. Abel hears the order and replies to leave it to him. Abel soon reached the area of the trap and wondered about to find it. He steps onto a trigger which casts a magic circle above his head, which he notices. The trap lands on his shield as he blocks on it, leaving just a few scratches on it. Abel could only stare at the trap and exclaimed, "Wow." He then reports back to the party that the trap was cleared. Camellia noted that he had done a good job, and informs the others that the trap fits the description. The members were shocked to learn that Wimmie was able to do that sort of trap detection, as they never heard of a type like his. As they continued their way, the guild members began to discuss amongst themselves about Wimmie. Seeing their reactions made him wonder if he had screwed up, but Marie was smiling to herself, as she knew that Wimm's definition of normal was not normal. After that, Wimmie had searched for traps repeatedly, proving that his skill was not a coincidence. Even Camellia thought silently about Wimmie. One of the members couldn't believe that he was using advanced enemy search as if it was natural. Dragon's Wings, with only 4 members, they became a B-rank party in just a few years, but she wondered why she had never heard of Wimmie even though he has advanced enemy search skill, and why was he fired. Wimmie once again calls out to her to inform that the humidity was rising, adding on the fact that they hadn't seen any low-leveled winged insect monsters for a while, which made Camellia question what he meant by that. WM informs her that he believes that they had entered the territory of a large monster, most likely the territory of the great tortoise Zaratin, which is a highly hostile monster, but he knew of a few detours which made it possible to avoid it. Once again, Camellia asks him if he was sure, but our boy replies that he was 90% sure. Hearing the 90% answer again made Camellia show off a mean face. She reminded him that even though he was a cautious person, when there was a high possibility, he needed to use the public transmission to report. Wimmie immediately apologized and thought about what he should do since he made another mistake. Camellia then tells him that she wanted him to leave the search to Simon and to move forward, since she needed his help in the battle. Crap was the word that crossed his mind as he believed that because of his mistake, he was removed from the search party. Camellia then reveals that the party wasn't going to avoid the great tortoise but were going to fight it instead, and that this time she wanted to see his skills as a granter. A flashback of Kronos kicking him out of the party crossed his mind as he knew that he couldn't make another mistake here, since he wouldn't have anywhere else to go. He reports back to her that he understood and would try his best. Wimmie grips his shirt tightly, knowing that he must make sure that he doesn't make any more mistakes. Marie continues to watch him from the back as he struggles nervously before calling out to Camellia, informing her that she would like to go with Wimmie so that she could use his buff skill. Camellia agrees with her suggestion and tells Marie to take care of him. Wimmie could only apologize to her for the trouble, but our girl was happy to do so as she tells him that they were going to show them what he was made of. Wimmie started to take some heavy breaths as he talked to himself about not standing out but to help others in need and to live in seclusion. He also wanted to figure out what he can do for others, which was his goal. That was how it should have been, but then he peeked at something. A super-duper ugly turtle-like monster was happily chomping down on some meat with a crazed look on its face. Our boy could only stare at it in silence as it continued to eat at the monster. Marie appears at his side and informs him that while it was eating, she also reminded him that everyone was watching and that this was the perfect opportunity to show them what he was made of. Camellia and the other members of the guild stood at the sidelines with a mean look on their faces. Seeing their strict faces causes Wimmie to panic as he realized that the people from Knct were watching him right now. He continued to think that to make up for his mistake earlier, he needed to ensure that he doesn't cause any more trouble for Knct. Our boy started to talk to himself like a man possessed, as Marie continues to call out to him to get his attention. She finally shouts at him, catching his attention as he turned to look at her. She tells him that they were going to go with the ice spear, and that he should give her the usual. Wimmie thought about the usual he gave as Marie walked in front of him while preparing her own equipment. But he soon recalls a past memory. He felt that this was right, as it was familiar to him. They used to dive together with only the two of them. Wimmie finally felt some comfort and confidence as he assures Marie that he was okay now. She was glad to hear that as she snaps his magic staff into its place, turning around to tell Wimmie that it was time for them to show off what they're made of. Wimmie notices that the magic stone she had was getting smaller, to which Marie informs him that she not only reduced the size, but also tripled the casting density. Wimmie smiled as he expected such a thing from her. Marie began to chant her spell called Generate, which casted something above them. The Ninja Turtle gone wrong monster was quick to take notice of it, as the guild members noted that it had noticed Wimmie and Marie. Out of the spell, a spear-like object started to form in the middle of the air. Wimmie looked at it with joy in his face, as a mage who knows nothing about this would be astonished. Marie's magic is invoked using principles far different from the magic that exists today. This was only possible if you have a rare job called Sage. There are two types of magic: basic magic and application magic. Basic magic is a magic that everyone can use, such as transmission magic, energy search, and so on. Application was a unique magic that can be used depending on your job, such as a warrior, sorcerer, priest, granter, and so on. Sage is said to be the strongest job because they can use all types of magic. They can also create the basic units of magic for new magic. As she casted her spell, Marie shouted her declaration of approval, approving the grant from the granter Wimmie Strauss. Wimmie accepts it and raises his hand in a rock-on style and started to cast two magic spells called Solid and Frozen at once. Everyone watched as a string of magic started to rise and reach to Marie's spell in the air. Camellia could see that he had applied the buff to the caster's magic. Wimmie then enchanted the object she created, turning it from a little boy to a fat boy looking more better than before. The turtle monster wasted no time and started to rush towards the two of them. Marie sees it coming and informs Wimmie to get ready on her mark. Sensing that the time was right, both shouted Ice Spear in unison. Like a torpedo that's been shot in the air, it landed right onto the turtle monster and crushes it in an instant. The guild members were all shocked and stunned to witness this sight right in front of them. The smoke and debris were flung everywhere, which made everyone cover their eyes except for Camellia, who stood unshaken. Her eyes were still focused onto the turtle monster. It really was killed in a single hit by Wimmie and Hidemari. She only felt cold, which Wimmie apologizes for, as the magic output was higher than he thought, but she assures him that it was okay since he had demonstrated his skills. Hidemari then shouts out to Camellia about whether she thought Wimmie was amazing, but her armor had been covered in frost, which she easily swipes away. Wimmie sees this and wondered if he had messed up again due to her precious armor. She then calls out to Wimmie. She informs him that she had gotten a message from Simon that he had spotted a wyvern, so they were going to set up camps, and that she wanted him to use his buff on the shield unit. As she turned to leave, she tells him that she wanted to see his defensive enchantment. Wimmie immediately replied that he understood, as Hidemari tells him that Camellia liked what she saw, but he refuses to believe that, thinking that Camellia was giving him another chance, so he needed to do his best next. She couldn't believe that our boy was acting like a bitch again, but her face was filled with joy as she sees the guild members discussing amongst themselves about what happened. They looked at Wimmie and could only see him as an odd guy, which our waifu overhears as she turns to ask them what they said, but they were too afraid to repeat it. We move on to a different part of the labyrinth, where Wimmie meets with Abel, the squad leader. He was impressed with Abel, as they were the same age. But after exchanging greetings, there was an awkward silence. Wimmie knew that he couldn't talk with someone he wasn't familiar with, so he didn't know what to say next. So our boy just started to spew random words all at once, making Abel question if he was okay. Wimmie replies that he was fine but thought that Abel would think of him as disgusting. He thought about how Abel would hate him, and that the same thing with the Dragon's Wings party will happen again. But Abel turned out to be different. He tells Wimmie that he didn't have to be so nervous. Our boy blushes heavily with joy after seeing such a nice person. Abel then informs Wimmie that he didn't have much experience with buffs, which made him question if there were any granters in Knct. Abel recalled that there was only one person in the past. Wimmie understood why, as being a granter was an unpopular job. He informs them that if they gave their approval, then the granter can grant the buff to the target. Grant magic is magic to change things through consciousness. Things like physical enhancement or anything that is an extension of the human senses. However, the buff can only be applied if the targets are willing to accept it. But a member of Abel's squad tells our boy that he didn't like buffs, bringing shock and fear into Wim's face. The member introduces himself as Mark and recounted his past. Having dived with a granter before, he knew that once a buff is granted, then their body will feel different. He recalled that there were times when he lost control of his body and could not do things properly. And granters would usually put all kinds of attributes on you. But Wimmie reveals that he could only use beginner-level buff, so there will be no such thing. He continues to inform them that he uses a rather complex combination of various buffs, so they didn't need to worry about it. But Mark still wasn't convinced, as he showed a face of distrust. He questions Wimmie on whether he thinks he was an amateur, so he tells Wimmie to go ahead and tell him the details. Our boy started to panic over whether he had made Mark mad. But Abel mentions that he didn't have much experience as well, and wanted to know more details. He expected this from one of the adventurers from Knct, as it wouldn't be surprising for them to have knowledge of other jobs. Wimmie then wonders if they surely wanted this, as he assures them that they didn't have to worry about it, as there wouldn't be any change in their senses. But Mark still doesn't believe him. He questions why there won't be any change and wonders if there was such a buff. Wimmie happily informs him that it was how his granter skill is and wonders if it was okay for him to explain. Mark hesitates before telling him yes. Wimmie was happy to hear that, as he never had been asked to explain before. So our boy began his lecture, which the guild members managed to understand some form of it. Wimmie was blushing heavily once again, as they even know how granter magic works. He continued his explanation on his skills once again, but pauses halfway to ask them if he spoke too much. The guild members were hesitant but said it was fine, so our boy went on a rampage with his explanation. But too many words came out of him that made Mark shout stop. The guild members seemed to agree with Mark's words as they looked shocked, while Wimmie wondered if he had messed up again. Mark then noted that it was surprising that he was able to grant dozens of these enhancements simultaneously. Wimmie reveals that it was a little different from the normal granter since he didn't have much mana. He needed to shred and apply it proficiency. But Mark was concerned about whether their senses would be the same as usual. He assures Mark that his body would feel like it was getting better. So Mark understands and started to grant Wimmie approval for the buffs. Hearing that made Wimmie question him if he was sure. Mark tells him that having that much knowledge was a sign of how good Wimmie was at it, which made him trust in him. Our boy started to blush again, and started his rock and roll spell casting. A magic circle surrounded Mark's body as Wimmie casts the enchantment spell. Once casted, Mark could feel something new.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.